Imagine taking the strict life or death discipline of a United States Air Force veteran, and then combining that with the grueling stamina of an emergency room nurse, and applying all of that to become a superstar in underground, alternative, mature entertainment.
I mean, it really sounds like the premise of a surreal fiction novel, honestly. You just rarely see those two completely distinct worlds collide, let alone result in a highly lucrative career that spans decades.
Right, exactly. And that is exactly why we are diving into this today. Welcome to the deep dive. We have a really fascinating stack of sources in front of us for you today. Biographical excerpts, database records, industry profiles, and they all center around a incredibly compelling, highly strategic figure named Amber Michaels.
Yeah, her trajectory challenges literally every assumption we hold about, when and how you can find success in a highly saturated, extremely competitive space.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission today, for you listening, is to analyze how an incredibly diverse, highly conventional background, combined with an unusually late entry into a controversial field of media, led to a remarkably long, specialized, and successful career.
Right, because we are going to treat this exactly as what it is, which is
Right.
a structural case study in career pivots, hyper-specialization, and the hidden value of life experience. We'll be looking at, the business strategies, the branding, and the sheer discipline required to carve out a 2-decade-long career in a field where most people barely last a few years.
Yeah, but before we even touch on her media career, we really have to look at the surprising life she led before she ever stepped in front of a camera.
Mm.
So she was born Wanda Jane Creech on November 17, 1968. This was in Bamberg, Bavaria, in what was then West Germany.
Which is an interesting historical starting point. Being born in a divided Germany during the Cold War era immediately sets a tone of, well, geopolitical complexity, even though her environment shifted quite early on.
Yeah, she was adopted by an American family at a young age and raised in Miami, Florida. But her professional life is where the contrast really becomes glaring. Because she didn't just head out to Hollywood or start auditioning for local theater, right? Her early adulthood was incredibly structured. She served a 4-year tour in the United States Air Force.
Right, which is a highly regimented chain of command environment. Punctuality, following precise orders, and maintaining composure under extreme stress are not optional there. They are mandatory for survival.
Absolutely. And then after her military service, she worked as a registered nurse. So we are talking about another highly demanding, high-stakes profession.
Uh-huh.
To me, looking at this transition, it feels like someone making a massive, almost incomprehensible career pivot.
Oh, for sure.
It's like a corporate accountant suddenly deciding to become an avant-garde performance artist. On paper, the skill sets just seem completely unrelated.
What's fascinating here is how those seemingly unrelated backgrounds actually build the perfect invisible architecture for what came next. I mean, she entered the mature entertainment industry in 1998 when she was nearly 30 years old.
Which, in that specific field of media, is considered very late, like
Mhm.
almost unheard of for a newcomer.
Right, exactly. The typical entry age for performers in that space is much, much younger. It's an industry that historically prioritizes youth over experience, sometimes aggressively so.
Oh, definitely.
But entering at 30 with a decade of intense real-world professional experience under her belt gave her a distinct advantage that younger performers simply could not manufacture.
Well, let's break down the mechanics of that advantage, because usually we think of age as a barrier in any youth-focused media.
Yeah, but it is about the intangibles. Think about the reality of a 12-hour nursing shift. You are dealing with difficult personalities, unexpected crises, standing on your feet all day, and maintaining your emotional regulation when everything goes wrong.
Yeah, that's intense.
So when she walked onto an alternative media film set, she wasn't a naive rookie trying to figure out how the world works. Film sets, especially in alternative media, can be chaotic, disorganized, and physically grueling environments.
Right. Co-stars show up late, lighting rigs fail, directors make sudden demands.
Exactly. A background in the military and healthcare is essentially advanced training in navigating high-stress, unpredictable schedules without losing your cool. She brought a professional operator's mindset into an environment that maybe wasn't used to seeing that level of groundedness.
So she treated it as a serious profession from day one. And that level of reliability makes you an incredible asset to producers and directors. They know you will hit your marks, deliver the performance, and not cause logistical headaches.
Precisely.
And that disciplined mindset was about to be put to the test. So in 1998, her debut year, she starts in what the industry calls Pro-Am Video's professional amateur productions. But she doesn't linger there. She rapidly graduates to mainstream productions for mature audiences.
Yeah, she lands one of her very first mainstream credits in a film called The Dallas Trip.
Right. And moving from the amateur tier to mainstream distribution in a single calendar year requires significant momentum.
It really does.
She certainly had that momentum. By the end of 1998 alone, she had amassed about 20 film credits. But she didn't just flood the market with general content, did she? She found a highly specialized niche, leaning heavily into alternative fantasy genres.
And this specific pivot is the cornerstone of her entire career strategy.
We're talking about very specific, highly theatrical subgenres, damsel in distress narratives, superheroine themes, and incredibly complex restraint scenarios. The sources mentioned early titles she did for a studio called Harmony Concepts.
Titles like Copycat Burglar and Replacement Damsels.
Yes, exactly. These weren't your standard productions. They required elaborate, highly choreographed physical setups and dedicated acting. But I mean, I have to push back here a little bit.
But
We established that entering this industry at 30 isn't just late. It is practically retirement age for most performers in that space. So, are we sure her niche was a brilliant strategic choice? Or was she just boxed out of mainstream high-budget roles because of her age and forced to take whatever weird alternative gigs she could get just to get a foothold?
that is a highly valid skepticism. I mean, it really is.
Yeah.
But the evidence points toward deliberate strategy rather than desperation. If we connect this to the bigger picture of business strategy, what she did is a textbook example of finding a blue ocean.
Okay, walk me through that.
Let's look at the mechanics of the mainstream mature industry in the late 90s. If she had tried to just be a general performer, she would have been competing purely on youth and novelty against thousands of 18 to 21-year-olds. It's a losing game.
So she deliberately changes the rules of the game she's playing.
Precisely. By focusing on elaborate, non-sexual peril setups and complex restraint scenarios, she completely shifted the playing field. These alternative scenes are physically demanding.
Right. They take a lot out of you.
They really do. They require a performer to endure discomfort, maintain a character under stress, and understand complex power dynamics for the camera. A lot of younger, inexperienced performers simply do not have the patience or the psychological presence for that type of specialized acting.
Wow, so she didn't have to compete with the entire market anymore. She just had to become the undisputed leader of her specific corner. And the audience for alternative fantasy and restraint is notoriously dedicated. By catering specifically to them, she basically created a captive market for her own brand.
It really is a masterclass in market positioning. She established herself as a reliable, highly skilled performer in a niche that requires a massive amount of physical trust between performers and directors.
Right, and that military and nursing background suddenly makes perfect sense. She was uniquely equipped to handle the logistical rigors of that specific subgenre.
Exactly. If you're enjoying the vibe, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with your friends. It really helps us out.
So that strategic positioning launches her right into what the sources identify as her peak years, roughly 2001 to 2005. The sheer volume of work from this era is staggering. She became one of the most prolific performers in specialized alternative modeling.
The numbers are just wild.
Yeah, throughout her career, she produced an output of over 250 to 270 films and videos, 324 magazine covers, and 54 distinct photo sets.
I mean, the logistics of completing 270 films are just mind-boggling.
Seriously, I get exhausted just trying to clear out a backlog of 200 emails, you know? The reality of actually traveling to, prepping for, and shooting 250 different alternative media setups where you're often physically restrained or portraying high-intensity power dynamics, that requires an almost superhuman level of stamina.
You do not achieve those numbers without being fiercely protective of your time, your health, and your professional relationships. It proves she was highly sought after by directors.
Yeah, she was doing dozens of titles for Harmony Concepts, consistently portraying these vulnerable yet remarkably resilient characters. But she wasn't trapped in that underground niche either. She maintained an incredible versatility.
Right. She successfully crossed over into high-profile, mainstream, mature titles, which, crossing from the underground alternative scene into the mainstream spotlight, is historically very difficult.
You gotta get typecast, right?
Exactly. Niche performers usually get typecast. Directors see them as the restraint specialist, and they just won't cast them in standard leading roles.
But she shattered that barrier. She appeared in major titles like Stolen Kisses and a highly recognized mainstream film called Dream Quest. To give you some context on Dream Quest, it featured Jenna Jameson, who was arguably the biggest name, like the absolute titan of the industry at the time.
And Amber's performance alongside her earned multiple AVN Award nominations, which earning an AVN nomination is essentially the Academy Awards of this specific industry.
Wow.
It proves her crossover appeal was genuinely critically acclaimed, not just a passing novelty.
And on top of the mainstream recognition, she also won the 2003 SI Genie Award for Best Model, which is a highly specific, fan-voted award dedicated entirely to alternative modeling.
So she is dominating the alternative underground and getting prestige award nods in the mainstream spotlight simultaneously. It's incredibly impressive.
Yeah. And here's where it gets really interesting. In this peak era, we were talking about the early 2000s, there are no social media algorithms doing the promotional work for you. There was no Instagram to build a following, you know?
Right, right.
She had to build a personal franchise using brilliant visual branding.
Because visual identifiers are crucial when your product is distributed physically.
Mm-hmm.
How does a fan in 2002 know they are looking at an Amber Michaels production when they are staring at a crowded wall of DVD covers in a video store?
Well, the sources detail her very identifiable look. She had these striking, seductive green eyes, but her bodily modifications acted as her real trademark. She had an ink tattoo on the back of her neck, a belly button piercing, and a very prominent scorpion tattoo on her lower abdomen.
Oh, right, the scorpion tattoo.
Yeah. The sources suggest the scorpion is a nod to her astrological sign, Scorpio. But practically speaking, it functioned as a corporate logo.
This raises an important question about the reality of early 2000s IP management. We often think that to build a recognizable brand, you have to stay strictly in one lane. But she proved that you can dominate a highly specific, specialized niche while retaining the ability to cross over.
Her visual brand, those tattoos, kind of tied it all together.
Exactly. It was a visual shorthand. If a fan of her restraint modeling saw that scorpion tattoo on the cover of a mainstream, high-budget feature, they would buy it just for her. She wasn't just an employee on a set. She was the intellectual property.
And managing that intellectual property means dictating your own shoot conditions. When your visual brand is that strong, you get to tell directors what you will and will not do. You set your own boundaries, which is a rare power in a famously predatory industry.
Right. And that control brings us to the final phase of her career, what we might think of as the long tail.
Yeah, because every peak eventually plateaus. That is the law of gravity in any career, whether you are an athlete, an actor, or an accountant. But Amber managed this incredibly smooth, decade-long glide path to retirement, rather than just burning out and vanishing.
Which is wild, because the burnout rate in the mature entertainment industry is notoriously high. The physical toll, the emotional drain, and the constant pressure to maintain a specific appearance, it destroys a lot of people in their first 3 years.
But post-2006, her output deliberately shifts. She moves away from that constant, massive volume of filming. She transitions to sporadic, limited appearances. She continued to cater to her dedicated niche audience, doing those specialized restraint and alternative productions, but entirely on her own terms.
And her credits extend all the way into the 2010s. Her final appearances, her ultimate retirement, didn't happen until 2017.
Right. So from 1998 to 2017, that is a 19-year career span. So what does this all mean? How does someone survive, let alone thrive, for 19 years in an industry designed to chew people up and spit them out?
Well, her longevity was intrinsically tied to the exact niche she chose back in 1998. Let's look at the mechanics of aging in a youth-centric industry. If she had relied solely on standard genre tropes, which are heavily dependent on extreme youth, her career viability would have had a strict expiration date.
Right, because you literally age out of the specific demographic you're trying to appeal to.
Exactly. But her specialized work in alternative modeling relied on different metrics entirely. The audience for damsel in distress or complex restraint scenarios isn't looking for standard tropes. They are looking for theatricality.
Oh, I see.
Her niche relied heavily on acting, on portraying shifting power dynamics, on conveying a specific, resilient psychological presence on camera.
And those are skills that actually improve with age and experience. A 40-year-old performer brings a gravity and an emotional weight to a power dynamic scene that a 20-year-old simply cannot fake.
Precisely. By positioning herself as a specialized actress and a master of physical endurance rather than just a fleeting visual commodity, she extended her career viability far beyond the industry average. She didn't age out of her niche, she just became the seasoned, undisputed veteran of it.
Wow. So she built a house on a foundation of skill and psychological performance rather than just riding a brief wave of novelty.
And because of that foundation, she dictated her own exit. She scaled back her output when she wanted to, serviced her most loyal fan base through limited releases, and retired when she was fully ready. It is a highly strategic career arc that modern entrepreneurs could really learn a lot from.
Okay, so for you listening, let's bring all these threads together. We started with Wanda Jane Creech, an adopted kid in Miami who learned strict discipline in the Air Force and emotional stamina as a registered nurse. And we watched her leverage those exact, seemingly unrelated skills to transform into Amber Michaels.
A performer who produced over 250 titles, navigated complex physical acting, and built a two-decade legacy in one of the toughest media environments on the planet.
Yeah. The takeaways here are highly actionable. First, there is profound hidden value in your life experience. The discipline of the military and the grit of healthcare weren't random detours. They were the very tools that allowed her to survive the grueling reality of film production without burning out.
Secondly, there's the strategic brilliance of hyper-specializing. When you enter a market late, or when you face overwhelming competition from younger, cheaper alternatives, don't try to fight everyone. Find a specific corner, no matter how niche or unconventional it seems, and make yourself the undisputed expert in that space. Create your own blue ocean.
And finally, the discipline required to maintain a career on your own terms. Building a distinct visual brand that cuts through the noise, knowing how to leverage niche fame into mainstream crossover appeal, and most importantly, knowing how to transition from high-volume output to a sustainable long-tail glide path so you can dictate your own retirement.
Whether you are 30 years old and contemplating a massive, terrifying career change, or you're trying to find your unique value proposition in a market that feels completely saturated, there are structural lessons in Amber's trajectory. It is about leveraging your hidden strengths and unapologetically claiming your specific audience.
Which leads us with a final thought for you to chew on. If someone can take the rigid, life-or-death discipline learned from the United States Air Force and the healthcare sector and use it to systematically conquer a highly specialized, controversial media niche,
Right.
what unconventional skills from your own past are you currently sitting on that could completely disrupt a new industry if you just apply them in a different way?